Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. You're watching the DMZ America Podcast for Friday, July 11th, 2025. Coming to you from the left, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis, coming to you from the right.
And today we have some news to share, some grim news. One of our colleagues, a prominent colleague in the field of editorial cartooning, I would say particularly during the 1990s and the 2000s, but going beyond that, Steve Benson of the Arizona Republic has died. He was 71 years old. If you haven't heard of Steve Benson, you've probably seen his cartoons if you were reading newspapers or magazines during the period that I mentioned. He was widely syndicated. You probably saw him. He was locally known as a fierce critic of the Mormon Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints, which obviously had a disproportionately, as you'd expect, high impact in Arizona, where he was doing his work. His family was kind of Mormon royalty. His grandfather was a high-ranking Mormon official, and he broke away from the church and became a committed and atheist, I think is fair to say. He started at the Arizona Republic in 1980, won the Pulitzer for editorial cartooning in 1993. And Scott and I have both knew him. Scott, you knew him considerably better than I did. He was, you guys crossed paths in a very unfortunate way that we're going to get into. And this is I should warn viewers. We don't normally do trigger warnings, and I don't normally believe in them. But this is going to be about ambiguous grief. What happens when you have very mixed feelings about someone who has passed away, about resolution. And so if that's a problem for you, which believe me, I understand, having experienced it myself, you might want to consider tuning in to our next show next week. But if you're still with us, thank you for staying on. And, so Scott, I don't know if we should I think sometimes we should just get to it.
Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and go to it.
So go ahead.
Well, just brief history. I was working in 1990, happily working at the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee, as their staff editorial cartoonist. My wife and I had just given birth to our second son, and life was percolating right along. I'd just gotten syndicated. My work was being reprinted widely. My career was clearly moving in the right direction. I get a call out of the blue from Steve Benson that he is going to move to a paper, the Tacoma. I can't remember what the hell it's called. Can you, Ted? The Tacoma Stinky Paper, whatever
the official newspaper of the airport for Seattle.
They call it the Aroma of Tacoma. But the owners of the paper at the time wanted to upgrade and really compete against the other two Seattle newspapers, Seattle Times and Seattle Post-Intelligencer. And so part of their strategy was to hire.
The Tacoma paper is the News Tribune.
Okay, sure. So they went shopping for high-profile cartoonists to kind of give them the instant cachet to raise their profile in that market. Steve revealed to me that they had offered him the job, and it was a very sizable raise. They're going to a sizable promotional budget was going to come along with it. I mean, it was everything back then that an editorial cartoonist wanted, and asked me if I was interested in the job in Arizona, and I had never really considered it. It would have been a big step up, and it was a big step up. My wife liked Arizona, so I said yes. Went out for the interview. Steve was part of the interview process, showed us around, pushed me to take the job. I did. Steve moved up to Tacoma, and then after a few months decided that he didn't like Tacoma and decided to move back. Now, this is when the story gets pretty ugly.
Now, by this point, you had moved to Phoenix, right?
Yes, I'm in the Phoenix area. My family's in the Phoenix area.
You've started at the paper. You're drawing cartoons every day. You're there. You bought a house.
We did not buy a house. We rented a house.
Okay,
so we didn't go quite that far, but we were, becoming ensconced in the community and 10 months later, the editor of the paper, Steve Benson's showing up probably once every 3 or 4 weeks in the office. It's very weird. That's just not heard of.
If you were a cat, he'd be stepping on your tail a lot.
Yes, precisely. And little too did I know that he was angling to come back, and convinced.
Did it not cross your mind?
No, because first of all, I'm naive and kind of a moron. I'll be
the first. Well, honestly, I don't even think that's it. I mean, yes, you may be naive and a bit of a moron, maybe a lot of a moron, but I've never heard, in the world of editorial cartooning, I have never heard of anyone doing what Steve did.
It happened before. Doug Marlette did it to Sam Rall at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And he went and lobbied hard. Sam was not a great cartoonist, but Marlette, I think at that point, had won a Pulitzer and was lobbying hard for them to do it, and they did it. Steve Benson came back, lobbied hard to get his job back, and after just shy of 11 months, they agreed, and they fired me, and they hired Steve back.
I think it probably is worth telling the story about what happened when they called you in, and then and with the syndicate.
Well, I should have gotten a trigger warning here.
Sorry. I mean, I look. You knew this was going to be hard.
The editor called me in without mentioning that Steve, and said that things, like I said, it gives me chills thinking about it just because it was so brutal. The guy who fired me, William Cheshire was his name, and
what a name!
Oh, and he's as big a prick as the name would imply. He would tell tales.
Bill or William?
His name, we called him Bill, but it was on his name on the plate on front of his desk. Everything was William, and Bill would tell you tales if you went out for dinner about people he fired. And I swear to God, he was actually getting a little excited in a very uncomfortable way, talking about how he fired this one guy, and the guy was crying, and he was like, "Oh, wow, can you believe it? He was crying." I mean, that's how brutal this guy was. Well, they called me in. It was about two.
That's how a lot of editors were back in the day. They were.
Yeah, that was expected. Bastards. So about 2 in the afternoon, I'm called in. I'm working on my cartoon idea for the day. He calls me in and says, "Scott, we're going to give you got 2 hours to decide whether or not if we're going to fire you or if you're going to quit." And I'm like, I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. And I tried calling around to different people who were not helpful, not least of which was Tribune Media Services, my syndicate at the time, when the editor of the
Scott, sorry to interrupt, but we should explain a little bit about in the cartoon business. There's always a danger of things being inside baseball. So in traditional cartooning that you came of age in, the typical model for a successful cartoonist, which you were, was to have a paper on staff, to be on staff at a paper, which meant you were responsible for drawing anywhere from 3 to 6 cartoons a week, and you would your name, the paper's name would appear on the cartoon. You received a salary, an office, benefits, medical, and so on, retirement plan. And syndication is where your cartoon is sold by a company that you've already drawn for the paper, and it goes all over the world to your client newspapers, who can or may choose to run your cartoons or not. And so that's kind of like supplemental usually.
Oh yeah. It was a very nice supplemental income. And so I called my syndicate to say, what should I do? Because I didn't know, do you quit? Do you let them fire you? And the editor's response was, well, I guess we don't have to syndicate you anymore. And pretty much, and then said, I have to go into a meeting, and he hung up the phone. It was a really terrible time. So anyway, after 2 hours, I thought, well, if I want to have a career going forward, it would look better if I quit versus got fired.
What would they have said? Did they threaten you with a grounds for firing?
No, they couldn't have, because 10 days before I was given my 1 year, which was weird at 10 months or 11 months, my 1 year evaluation, it was glowing, and I got a nice raise, and I mean, it was great.
So I remember that at the LA Times. Same thing with me. But but I digress. Go ahead.
No, I should have, in hindsight, I should have let them fire me, because then I could have sued them for cause and gotten a much better severance than I got. I got a 2-week salary severance, typical for the time. But one of the most brutal things anyone's ever said to me, and probably 2 or 3 things, is William Cheshire behind his desk in his southern drawl, glaring at me, and you could tell he probably had a Woody going, because he was so excited about how crestfallen I was.
You were going to be part of his you were going to star in his next story.
Yes, I was, and I said, well, I guess I'm going to resign, I guess, but then I said, and this is pathetic, I guess. I guess it is in a way, but I had to think about it. My thoughts turned to my children. And I said, how am I going to take care of my kids? And this is a direct quote. I will never forget it. Bill Cheshire leaned forward, looked me dead in the eye and said, well, that's really not my problem now, is it? And
nice guy.
Yes. And 2 days later, then a paper announced the triumphant return of Steve Benson. And so
now, did you know while you were getting shit canned, did you understand what was happening, or what did you think was happening?
I really didn't know, although I had an inkling at that point. I'm going, oh, okay, I kind of get it now. And then I figured something like that was about to happen. But I honest to God, Ted, up until that point, I had no idea that this was about to happen. Mm-hmm. And so so Benson came. Benson has since then never apologized. Well, now he can't.
But it seems unlikely unless you're at a seance.
Yeah. There was never. He did reach out, and when I was president of the Cartoonist Association in 2002, he was helpful in securing Senator McCain from Arizona to be one of our speakers, and also the spokesperson for the Pentagon was also
Victoria Clark.
And that was very helpful, and I was appreciative and mentioned him in my remarks, but there was never like an actual, let's talk about this. And I realized what I did was really shitty. Now, people say, well, what should he have done? Well, if it was you, if it was me, and someone said, we're going to fuck over another cartoonist, and we're a pretty small fraternity. Even then, Ted, it was about 200 of us.
Yeah.
We both would have, I'm 99.9% sure would have said, no, I'm not going to do that. I can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I want to paint this picture, right? For anybody who's like maybe half listening, like while they're driving or whatever. So Steve himself called you and said, hey, I'm leaving of my own accord. I'm going to Tacoma, and hey, if you'd like, I can hook you up with this job. He personally lured you to Phoenix.
Yes.
And then came back, thought better of it. And instead of just saying, and frankly, he was a successful cartoonist. He really could have gone elsewhere. If he had sent his resume out and said to other people, I'm not happy in Tacoma, he could have ended up, I don't know, Salt Lake City. He could have gone somewhere else.
Or Seattle.
Or Seattle. But he chose not to do that. He's like, I want to come home. And even though now there's, little Timmy is now in my old room, little Timmy's got to go because, even though I lured little Timmy and said, you can move into my old room, it's like, sorry. And then he marooned you without an income in Arizona. Right?
Well,
That's basically the story.
To be fair, I was doing a comic strip, which was doing pretty well, relatively well, at the time, called The Buckets, and so I had an income. I wasn't left destitute.
Well, that's fortunate, but that's no thanks to Steve Benson or your editor.
No thanks to Steve Benson. The Arizona Republic did not carry the strip, by the way. They couldn't even bring themselves to do that. And Ted, talking to you about this many years after it happened, but you said something that really, really rattled me, and why I would continue to be upset about this story. And that is, Steve Benson didn't give a shit, not just about me, but if my kids starved or were homeless. Losing a job, as we all know what can happen in America, can lead to some pretty bad stuff. And he didn't care. He didn't care that I would suffer. He didn't care that my kids would suffer. He cared that his ego was satisfied. And, he's a narcissist and was a narcissist, and the clinical definition of that word. So going forward, when I heard that he had passed away, I mean, it was many years later, my career got back on track, but I lost 4 years. I was not in the business for 4 years because of that episode. That's a long time, from 30 to 34 years, and that's prime.
And those are pretty key. That's prime time for any.
That's Ali getting stripped of his title. It's like I was on the way. Ted, we had this conversation yesterday where you were actually pissed off because my work was reprinted regularly in Newsweek, Time, the New York Times, the Washington Post. It was, it was the trajectory was, everything was coming up Scott. And then all of a sudden, it didn't. And that was responsible from one person particularly, and I blame Steve Benson because he actively lobbied to get his job back and fuck me over. And so years go by, I finally get back on my feet, get a job at the Birmingham News, and then end up at the Chicago Tribune, then my dream job. Now, would that have happened if I'd stayed in Arizona? Probably not. Who knows, those roads less taken, but I do know that for 4 years I was out of the business. When you hear that someone who did that to you passes away, and it's been many, many years, like I said, this was in the early 90s, so it's been a while. And Ted was very sweet, by the way, so I'm going to ruin your reputation, Ted, and say that Ted called last night and says, I'm kind of worried about you. You still seem kind of, off kilter because of this whole Benson thing. And I was, because I was processing it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond to it. I'm much more equipped. It takes me, I'm slow. So it takes me a while.
I mean, the thing is, so, I mean, look, we didn't talk about what I'm about to say, but I hope you'll be okay with it. I mean, we've anticipated this moment, you and I. We've talked about it.
Yeah, Steve Benson had a major stroke about 2 years ago. His work had suffered prior to that. It really was getting to the point where it made zero sense. I mean, it was just, you looked at it and you scratched your head and went, what does this even mean? The Mirror, which was an online site, asked him to retire, and he did. And then he had a major stroke. So he's been suffering. His family's been dealing with him having a stroke and dealing with him and helping him through this. And then we don't know what the cause of death was specifically, but we do. I have to believe, and so do you, that it was tied into having a major stroke and probably having another one.
Yeah, probably an aneurysm. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So but even though you're ready for it, you just don't know how you're going to react to it. Bill Cheshire died a wretched, horrible death, I'm told, some kind of neurological disorder. So, there is a God. I guess that's one, like you've pointed out, Ted, that was someone who was really ultimately responsible for his whole episode.
Yeah, I know you look, and when you tell the story this way, I kind of understand more why you hold Steve so. I didn't realize Steve had called you. I thought you had just gotten that he had just made the decision. Then you'd gotten the call from, I guess, Mr. Cheshire, and then you'd gone out there to take the job. And Steve, showed you around. Here's where the non-dairy creamer is in the break room. Here's where we store the cartoons. Blah blah blah. And then basically it was amicable, but it was more than that, right? He kind of basically passed, as cartoonists often did, passed jobs to one another, and he passed this job on to you. So he was directly involved in your move to.
Oh yeah, no. He was
but taking him back, I mean, he shouldn't have begged and asked for it. Should not have. But then at the same time, he did, and Cheshire agreed. So for me, Cheshire didn't have to agree, and it was his call.
Right, and shouldn't have. I mean, just by
should not have. I mean, here's let me go further than that, Scott.
Okay.
Let's just say he wasn't really happy with your work or you. He still shouldn't have taken Steve back after he fired you. Let's just say he was like, I'm just done with Scott. Fine. But as a rule, if you're the boss, it makes you weak to be like, okay, sure, you can come and go as you please. I mean, I would have been, if I were Cheshire, I would have been pissed at Steve for like, okay, oh well, you go have fun in Tacoma. Go live in the land of no sun. Enjoy that.
Yeah.
It's like I would have been bye. And honestly, it was kind of like a weak sister move for him too.
It was a weird move, but that was kind of the tail end of when newspapers had more money than sense.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, I want to correct the crawl there. He was not with the Arizona Republic. He was shit canned from that 15 years ago. Ted, he worked.
Right. I know, but that's the paper that he was best known for.
Okay, because he worked for the Arizona Mirror, I guess it was called, which is one of those startup news sites. Yeah, I mean, it was just like, apparently when he was fired from the Republic, I have to admit that gave me some satisfaction, because I was thinking, wow, fired from the Republic. I have some experience in that. It sucks.
Yeah.
And he apparently had quite a collapse after that, and which is very sad, because what happens in our profession, and you know this, Ted, is that many of our cartoonist friends, that's what defines them. That job, not your kids, not your family, not your marriage, but your job is what defines you as a person. And he was all about that, apparently, and it was really quite sad when I heard that he just had like I said, a mental collapse, because that's what defined him. And that's sad. And
yes, that's why he had a mental collapse. I mean, look, he was a manic dude. I mean, I'm an atheist, and when we talked at one of the conventions, he would just chew my ear off about how evil religion was, and he just wouldn't. And I was kind of like, okay, I get it, let it go, dude. But he was like really, 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 even by cartoonist standards, maniacal, kind of.
Yes, absolutely.
Obsessive.
And so there's a lot of things I could say that I did not care for the guy, but I really, like I said, he hurt me very, very deeply. So when the news broke yesterday that he had passed away, I wasn't sure how I felt. And this is where having a friend like Ted Rall comes in and is incredibly helpful. When you called and said, I was having trouble processing it, because I think mostly because it came down to, I thought I would have a bigger reaction, like good riddance to bad garbage, or fuck him, or
like woohoo,
or even go the other way and say, as a Christian, as a practicing Catholic, to say I'm sorry for. I'm sorry he suffered. I'm sorry. I am sorry for his family. That must have been a very, very difficult couple of years dealing with someone who was that ill and who was not going to recover. Apparently, it was there wasn't really any hope at some point, and that must have been a very, very difficult situation for his wife and for his kids. So I'm sorry for that. But like I said, I didn't know how to process this, because there was no closure. He never called ever over, like I said, 1990. So that's 30 plus years ago. How great would that have been if he called up at some point and said, listen, what I did was wrong and I'm sorry. No skin off his apple. It would have taken 5 minutes and it would have really gone a long way.
Yeah. No, I know you would have been.
Yeah, I would have been fine. That would have been okay, but he never did that.
You and I, that's how you and I are.
I don't think he ever felt he did anything wrong. I've never really talked to anyone else who's talked to him about this or had talked to him about it. I guess, again, impossible to find out today. But I'd never heard him bring that up with any other cartoonist. And
it's not a story that was well known. Scott, if I didn't know you personally, no one else in our very gossipy fraternity who are all a bunch of little girls, ever picked up the phone or told me over one too many beers, by the way, do you ever hear the Scott Stantis, Steve Benson story? Like, I never heard it. It's just, I don't think it's well known, which I think brings us to, an aspect of this that I know you found upsetting, is sort of, so you started, of course, obviously after the news broke, we saw on social media and in our personal texts from our colleagues, like, so sad news. That's really too bad about Steve, such a great guy. All the stuff you normally hear. What a great guy, blah, blah, blah. And how did you feel knowing, I know also, and we've got to address this, our fraternity was not there for you at all when this happened to you.
No, there were no comments, no comments of support. In fact,
I was still in college, so it had not my fault.
I was going to blame you directly, but
yeah, sure.
Now that you mention it, no, there were a number of cartoonists who, when Benson got the job back, actually posted, or they didn't post back then, but said the comments were great. Great news. Great to see that. Great to see that Steve, a great cartoonist getting, a great job. So it's like, really? Did they credit anybody? And to their credit, to Steve's credit, and to the credit, and to the diabolical credit of the Arizona Republic, getting rid of me that quickly really was pretty smart. If you're going to do it when I had not even worked there a year. So,
I don't know how smart it was.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're going to do it, if you're going to, if you don't want repercussions, and if you want it to go as smoothly as it can go.
Also, I honestly think you were a good choice at the Arizona Republic. You love Arizona.
I love Arizona. I really liked, my politics were very similar. Whereas it was a very good mix. A very good match. It really was. Kind of a McCain Republican.
One of those people who had a massive conversion from hard right Republican to liberal Democrat.
Yeah, which again, I think I probably surprised a lot of people, and I was not a great fit for that community. But at that point, Benson had established himself firmly in that. And let me say some nice things about Steve Benson. He took on Evan Mecham, who was then the governor of Arizona. High. I'm not sure what the term would be, but he was very active in the Mormon Church. Was obviously a Mormon, and the Mormon Church backed him, Evan Mecham, to the gills. And Steve Benson took off after him and saw him as a bad actor and as a corrupt politician. It turned out both were true. For Steve to do that in that market, going against a church, the Mormon Church, which Steve's grandfather was the prophet. And if you know anything about the Mormon Church, the prophet is the head of the church, speaks directly to God. So they say.
So they claim. Yeah.
So they claim. And so for Benson to go after Ev Mecham, that was courageous. That truly was. And so you got to hand it to him for that coming out. But this is one of those instances, Ted, where I do question the kind of person that Steve Benson was, in that his grandfather was the prophet. And I guess when you become the prophet, you're a prophet for life. And Steve went to go visit his grandfather, and his grandfather was senile. Apparently had shown dementia significant.
Didn't see that coming. Wah, wah.
And Steve, instead of working behind the scenes, which I would have done if it was my family member, I would have worked to say, Grandpa, you got to step down. You can't, he can't function as the head of this massive church. Steve went public. He went to a reporter and spilled the beans. And
is that necessarily, okay, on the one hand, it sounds mean. On the other hand, you and I have spent 4 years saying that the Joe Biden's family members and staff shouldn't have covered for him and should have forced him to step down, and if not, talk to the media to force him to step down. Isn't that kind of similar?
I suspect it is, but I also think that I don't know exactly how things worked out there, but Steve also had a weird quirk that he liked hurting people. You and I can both say that he seemed to genuinely enjoy hurting people, and he didn't always punch up. And
he was a sadist.
Okay, yeah. I'm not going to defend the guy. Okay.
No, honestly, I know he was. So, one of my big interactions with him, which pale compared to yours, in editorial cartooning, I probably like in a lot of other professions, but it's very generationally bifurcated. And you pointed out he's the first of his sort of claque to die.
Yeah.
And then you're sort of like, you're like in the claque that follows after that. And then I'm part of a claque that follows that. And so the point is I'm kind of like two away. But even so, I mean, when I was suffering lots of death threats and stuff over my most controversial cartoons like Terror Widows, Pat Tillman and such, I knew I had to call Steve Benson because he went through this kind of thing a lot. And he was very famous for making fun, for example, of the victims of the Texas ag bonfire tragedy and stuff like that in his cartoons. And I knew he had really controversial cartoons. He, unlike me, he wanted the controversies. He told me, and he told other people too. He would literally be like, what can I draw to piss someone off? I was more like, what could I do? What can I draw that I will personally like and think is a good cartoon? And if it pisses people off, oh well. And those two things are not the same. But I'm willing to make people angry. Steve was, for him, it was an object. But anyway, I called him up, and he did give me, actually, by the way, great advice for Crisis Management 101. Like, he was like, don't talk to local television. It's a waste of time. Never talk to Eyewitness 12. Don't talk to them. When the Associated Press calls, tell them that you want to respond to their questions by email. And then carefully craft your response so that if any single sentence is quoted by itself, or any pair of sentences or any group of sentences, that those sentences will not make you look bad. Don't talk to them on the phone because it's extemporaneous and you're likely to say something you might regret. Lots of advice like that. And it was all I live by the Benson code. If that next time, if and when something like that happens to me again, and I'm in the center of a media clusterfuck, I'll do that. It helped me during the LA Times thing too. But the point is, he definitely, when we talked about the people who he pissed off, he would just laugh and laugh and laugh at how pissed off and sad they were over his cartoons. Hey, he got pleasure out of it. And, part of me thought that was punk rock, and part of me thought that he was an asshole.
I'm not going to disagree with you if you think that's going to happen.
I wasn't
simply not.
You to. No. And, you and I have talked about, we said, like, you've carried this. I mean, this is not something, I want to be clear here. This is not like Steve kicks the bucket and then I get a call from Scott. By the way, I know we've never talked about this before, but this guy really fucked me over. Like, no. Like, Scott, you've been carrying this with you for years. We've talked about it a bunch of times. And it's like, it's really, he traumatized you. I would say that's like your LA Times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. When you're shit canned out of the blue maliciously for somebody else's pleasure, it leaves a mark. This definitely left a mark. And, like I said, obviously worked through it and, I'm in a pretty good place now. Yeah. But there is, and I think that may have been another part of why this news really rattled me, or at least, you think you've worked through things, right, Ted? You think you've gotten a pretty good handle. Years ago, I did a piece called "The Beatings Never Really Stop." And it was about my own sense of my own experience with being abused as a kid, physically and emotionally abused. And I thought when I wrote it, I've dealt with that. I went through therapy. I really have done the work, and I was going to be okay. Mm-hmm. But then as soon as this thing went public, it was a full-page cartoon essay. And as of today, I think it's been shared well over 20 million times.
Wow.
Because there's a lot of people who dealt with this stuff. I went into a deep, dark pit of despair for 6 months. Even though I had done the work, I was confident that I could deal with it, I couldn't. And the same is true here. I think that, this is closure of a different kind. I would have liked to have had reconciliation. I would like to have had an apology. Neither of those happened. and we're going to go for, and was obviously never going to happen. And now, especially, it will never, unless it's in his will never happen. So, I guess the question here is, how do you deal with that kind of, I like that, ambiguous grief? I'm not feeling grief. I'm just, because I didn't know Steve really for years afterwards. He was really kind of a non-entity in my life. But as part of the fraternity, like I mentioned, we're a very tight fraternity and we all know each other. Heard dribs and drabs of what's happening here and there with each cartoonist, and Steve was among those. It's been a struggle. It's been a struggle for the last 48 hours to try to kind of put this in a category and to categorize this in a way that, gives me some level of comfort. You know what the comfort is? My life turned out pretty good. I have 2 great kids. I have an adorable, probably the greatest grandchild ever created in our species history.
Until mine is born.
Well, you don't have one, but when you do, you're going to know exactly what I'm saying. When I heard the news, we were driving around with my grandson the other day. It was a couple days ago, and you talk about a great tonic. He's a year and a half old, and he's in the back seat going, Nona and Poppy, which is what he calls us. Nona and Poppy live in a lake. He goes, no, we don't. He goes,
better not.
But he was telling me,
Mary Jo Kopechne?
Yes, it's a Teddy Kennedy reference. That would have been incredibly impressive. But my point is that there's so much joy in my life now that I don't need to dwell on the trauma. But the trauma creeps up, and the trauma, as you know, the trauma
will dwell on you. So Scott, there's, according to the experts, there are several types of ambiguous grief, and basically, so generally, ambiguous grief is emotional pain experienced when a loss is unclear, undefined, or lacks closure. So, for example, when the person's still alive physically, but they're emotionally or psychologically unavailable, like they're demented, or it could be like someone goes missing, or divorce or estrangement, where there's physical absence without any kind of resolution. There's estrangement, which I think is self-evident. And I think what you're dealing with here is unresolved conflict. Someone you dislike is basically, was around, and, they, until 2 days ago, theoretically, this could have been resolved. Really probably until about 3-4 years ago, right? Theoretically, it could have been resolved between you two. There's a world in which you guys could have both been close friends. I mean, you're a few years apart. You were both, editorial cartoonists. You both had sort of a similar political journey in many ways. I mean, you could have been friends. I mean, although, frankly, temperamentally, I think you're very different. And also your values are very different. And I mean that as a compliment to you.
Thank you.
That said, but I think you now that this can never be resolved. It's the ambiguity is in the fact that it was fucked up, it was confusing. You felt really alone, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
And and that's a huge part of it. I mean.
Well, let me ask you this, Ted. How many people?
I wasn't as lonely. I got to say, by the way, full transparency here. When I had my crisis with the LA Times, a bunch of cartoonists stepped forward. You more than most, you more than all. Rob Rogers wrote a really great piece for the internet that was really great. John Backdorf wrote a great piece. Cartoonists around the world did protest cartoons about what had happened to me. 24 of our peers wrote depositions that were attached as a addenda to my lawsuit. But you know who didn't return my call? Steve Benson.
Really?
No, he did. He couldn't be bothered.
Did you ever figure out or find out why?
Well, no, because I was like basically just I reached out to everybody. and I wasn't really asking for that much. I wasn't asking for anyone to say, oh, I think Ted Rall is awesome or anything like that. More like I was asking just for expert testimony about like what are the procedures at their newspaper. Yeah. If something happened like this, how would it be investigated and how would they handle it? What would they be likely to do? And if they thought you were guilty of something, what would they fire you? What would they do? Anyway, he wasn't willing. He couldn't be arsed, right? And
interesting. I didn't know that. I thought that seems like the kind of thing he would jump on.
So I reached out to everybody, and a couple dozen people came through. I mean, arguably, and then not to mention, I had that situation where I had to raise $75,000 for my lawsuit, and people donated $85,000. I mean, it's like, so people did reach out and help. I got help. You didn't ask, and I don't know.
I didn't ask.
I mean, obviously, more would have happened if you'd asked. I don't know how much more, but more would have happened.
I suspect so. And I also, I was about to ask you, how many of the cartoonist fraternity have you talked to and asked about this and mentioned this episode? And they had no clue. I don't think anyone knows. I didn't broadcast it. There was no reason to. I mean, and I'm also, like I said, it was traumatic and it was embarrassing. And
you had to, I think when I met you, which was probably about 8 years after this happened, or so, you were more buttoned up then. I think you were really like not as open, and I think you were probably just looking to move on.
Yeah, because like I said, I had to scramble and make up 4 years of a career, and happily the Birmingham News. I was the first one. They finally got to the S's, and I was the first one to say yes, I guess.
Well, they were good to you. I mean, for a long time.
Say that again?
They were good to you for a long time.
No, I look back, and as much as I loved working at the Chicago Tribune and working in the Tribune Tower, which was a singular honor, I think my years at the Birmingham News were by far the best years I had because they trusted me, and I trusted them.
That's massive, and I could tell when I visited you there. Just the way that like your colleagues and your editor like talked to you.
Yeah, it was.
They respected you, which you don't always see that for editorial cartoonists in a newspaper. I mean, I can think of lots of places where I walked in and talked to a colleague, and I was like, wow, they don't really, they don't really like you, or they don't look up to you, do they?
Yeah. So the Birmingham News was it turned out to be a great stop. My kids were raised here, and we settled. They went to junior high school, and college here.
You could have left.
And yeah, there were some opportunities to leave, and didn't. And in point of fact, in Chicago at the Tribune, when the time came to kind of transition away from a staff position to doing freelance work for them, I moved back here to Birmingham. I like it here. There are elements I like very much. The politics can make your teeth itch. It's so screwed up, but it's a cheap place to live.
You're the resident liberal.
Oh, when I got the job here, Ted, I told you that it was the only time in my entire life I was called a liberal with a straight face. I mean, it was just like, and what's funny is they were just transitioning from.
My favorite is the book learning guy.
Okay. You want me, should I tell it real quick?
You got it now.
Okay. Super. I just started working there. At the Birmingham News in Birmingham, Alabama, and we worked in a bullpen. The editorial board had its own space away from the newsroom, but we all had our own cubicle. It wasn't an office, which was always a point of contention. But that's another issue. And I was working later, and that was the trust thing. Is that my deadline was like 9:30 at night, 10 o'clock at night. It was awesome. So all the bosses, all the writers, everyone's gone. I'm in the office. The phone rings. I answer it. The guy says, who is this? I said, I'm Scott Stantis. And he goes, do you know that cartoon guy? I go, well, yeah, that's me. and he just goes off. I mean, literally just goes off. Wow, college boy, you come down here and tell me, college boy, you can't come down here and tell us what to do, college boy. And I'll tell you another thing, college boy. And seriously, man, this goes on for he doesn't take a breath for 3 minutes. When he finally does, I said, sir, I have to interrupt. I apologize, but I was actually, I actually dropped out of college. I'm not technically a college boy. And there was a long pause.
A semi-college boy.
And there's a long pause, and he says, "Well, then I guess you're just one of them book readers, ain't you?" True story. I swear on the head of my children. True story. I was awesome. Like, guilty as charged, man. Yep, I read books. That is my
true criminal.
That is my crime. So yeah, but Birmingham was just a great place to be and to work. And as I said, they trusted me. I trusted them. Went up to Chicago, and that had its own challenges, but that was a great stop. It really was, and was a great cherry on top of my career. And I have some complaints, obviously, some traumas, but at this stage, I'm a very happy person, and I think that that's probably the best revenge for anyone who wishes you ill. Right.
No, I mean, yeah, and frankly, it's also interesting too, like just from like a, I guess, second generation, right? Like I knew about this story through you. And, I never thought about, after you told me that story, I could never really think the same way about Steve Benson ever again. I mean, I didn't have anything personally against him or for him really, but certainly not against him. But after that, I was like, whoa, that's hard. And
it was harsh. It was harsh. And so dealing with this, I'm kind of,
some people are going to watch this, Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt. And they're going to say, some people I think are going to say, like, this is not the time. Right, like the guy just died. You should just say nice things. Don't speak ill of the dead.
That's horseshit.
I agree.
Is he going to be less dead a week from now? I mean, seriously.
Well, it's also, frankly, it's exactly the right time because when someone dies is when their obituary is written. It's when we consider their lives. Some of my favorite obituaries are in the New York Times. They contain nuance. They try to tell the story, and they'll talk about like the things that a person did that might have been impressive, as well as their foibles and their fuck ups. And I think, and I will say, I hate the whole like, sanitizing of someone. I mean, I think Steve Benson, and I think everybody deserves to have like people having discussions like this that are like honest about his passing and his legacy and his life. I certainly have not, had a blameless, perfect, sweet life, and I haven't been nice to everybody. But I mean, I would really hope that, like, that when I die, people will consider the whole. And I kind of respect people like Steve Jobs, who told his biographer, "Hey, I'm going to put you in touch with people who I fucked over, so that you can get their story too." I think that's the proper way to. It's biography time, and this is it. I mean, Steve's legacy. Perhaps I don't know how it was for his family, but certainly it was more complicated for you in particular, and probably some of his other colleagues as well. I would imagine,
and
because if someone behaves like that once, it's unlikely to be, a quantum singularity.
Well, it also, like we said, my heart goes out to his family, and so that's this. And like I said, the last couple of years had just sucked.
No doubt.
Dealing with that. But I was walking with a friend of mine this morning, Ted, and tell me if you agree with this. I think you will. Because he asked, when you die, I mean, there's going to be some people. Does it bother you that there's going to be some people who are happy? And in my response,
I always want to bring joy to people. So if I bring joy to people, hi, leaving. That's fine.
I should have thought that's a better answer, but my answer was, you know what? If I leave this earth and there's not somebody who's glad I'm gone, then I probably haven't lived the kind of life I should have led.
It means you weren't, as Theodore Roosevelt famously said, in the arena.
Right. That you're, smeared in blood and mud, and that you fought the fight, and that you tipped over a few carts and you pissed off a few people. And there's going to be, like, when I die, there's going to be people who are going to be going, "Oh, thank God, what an asshole."
For sure, no
And
doubt.
that's fine. And that's how it should be. And so you mentioned the measure of a human being and their biography, and that should be part of your biography, is that, I wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. Steve Benson's not perfect. Ted Rall's close to perfect, but
That's only due to my proximity to Clovis.
yeah, Clovis is perfect.
That's true.
Let's be clear.
That is true.
But your life and all things is going to have balance, and if you've lived as big a life as you can, then yeah, there's going to be people who aren't enamored of you, and that's fine. That's just fine.
Scott, thank you so much for doing this. I know
Sure.
it wasn't easy, and
No,
I hope it maybe helps some people who are watching. I'm sure it will. These are feelings that lots of people have, and I think it's really courageous of you to be willing to talk about this in a public forum.
Well, if I can help just one person, then we've really failed. We need to really grow our audience, Ted. Just saying.
So true. And your penance for saying bad things about our former dead colleague is what? You have to do the singing during the closing credits. And off we go.
Okay, good. Sushipe no, hey no bis, crescele nos dextramum, crescele nos dextramum, crescele nos dextramum, say no.